You can learn a lot about a city by its saints, and in many ways the story of New York is the story of its saints. A freed slave with a talent for hairdressing, a society widow with a gift for teaching, the first televangelist priest, or a friar from southern Italy who had never set foot in New York. Physically, anyway. On the surface, they may not seem to have much in common, except that their backstories are all wildly different from each other. Join me as we journey across New York's vast history to visit with the souls who lived life as best they could, helping as many people as they could during some of the most tumultuous periods of New York history. The actual lives of Catholic saints seem like fairy tales. I mean, how do saints think? Do they worry about what's for dinner? Do they not worry about petty affronts and local politics? Were their minds focused solely on the issues of the soul? When you think of the wide chasm between temporal and spiritual life, sainthood can't possibly be for the practical. But how about a saint who would guide anyone in need of advice on any matter, no matter how ordinary? What about a saint who preached and lived in our time of movie cameras and world wars and immigration rhetoric? And how about a saint you could visit right here in New York? Today, we meet the superhero saint of the 20th century, Padre Pio. He's the patron saint of adolescents, stress relief, and civil defense workers. Each saint has his or her own struggle. But how strange does your existence become when you're a priest villainized by the Vatican? When the Pope dismisses you as a crackpot and a fraud? Long before his canonization, the Vatican refused to allow Padre Pio to leave his church. So concerned that he may be a charlatan, or far worse, a demon, he was relegated to a small friary a long drive from Naples. And the message from Rome was clear. If those uneducated, superstitious people of southern Italy need Padre Pio, they're going to have to find him. Yet the more the Vatican tried to silence the legend of Padre Pio, the further his story seemed to fly. His followers became more earnest. The tales of his holiness became more outlandish. Once these miraculous stories of his being in two places at once, the stories of his healing the mortally ill, and the stories of his bleeding stigmata reached outside of Italy. It wasn't just Italians flooding the friary. Before long, it was pilgrims on real-life spiritual pilgrimages who came to see the living saint, who many felt had an ability to read souls. When the Vatican sought to remove him from this hotbed of devotion, the townspeople rioted, throwing furniture at the Vatican representative, even threatening to kill Padre Pio in a very literal interpretation of over his dead body. The Vatican eventually backed down, reconciling with Pio, and he was once again allowed to say Mass. Padre Pio spent most of his days hearing confessions and giving comfort and life advice. His spiritual children were desperate for his guidance on very mundane matters. Will I be drafted? Whom should I marry? Will I ever have a baby? The faithful followed him everywhere, desperate for a quick word. Masses said by Padre Pio were always packed, and the line for his confessional was always long. And the stories of this living saint spread even further. He was seen at a deathbed of one of his spiritual children in Queens. American GIs returned to the States, swearing Pio stopped Allied warplanes in mid-flight. And in New York, many Italian immigrants happened to hail from outside of Naples and found a spiritual father in the cantankerous and sickly Italian friar. One thing Padre Pio understood about modern life from speaking to all these ordinary people was that the suffering and the corrosion of the soul was universal and just as devastating as any bullet. The advice given by Padre Pio was always simple and direct. Pray. Pray unceasingly, pray fervently, pray humbly, pray perseveringly. Today, his call to prayer has brought about thousands of Padre Pio prayer groups all over the world where people can pray together in keeping with and under the auspices of the Vatican. And I dare say if you've never seen a Padre Pio statue in a Catholic church, you should probably look around more. Padre Pio wanted to help relieve the systemic suffering of the body and the soul, and felt called to set up some sort of medical foundation for the people around his friary, who were typically less affluent and educated. What opened in the 1950s as a small clinic with a few cots has become a state-of-the-art 1,000-bed private research hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo. The Hospital for the Relief of the Suffering was established to heal not only the physical wounds, but the wounds of the soul. The city of charity is sustained by prayer, and in the words of Padre Pio, prayer unites all good souls and moves the world. Fittingly, if you want to visit Padre Pio, you're going to have to seek him out, and when you find him, it'll be in a humble setting. Visit his shrine within the Church of St. John the Baptist on 31st Street in Manhattan, a small church near Madison Square Garden. And if you want to know what it felt like to receive absolution from Padre Pio, head on down to Old St. Patrick's Cathedral and check out the interactive sculpture, I Absolve You.